Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves an album from an actor named Fred Vanterra titled Mythanien. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the album on the screen here on Spotify, as well as a little informational booklet which has just gone missing, which is awesome. This has got information about the track here. Whenever I click the track, of course, it's going to disappear, but that's okay. We'll summon it back up whenever we need to read stuff about the songs. We're going to listen to each of these 13 tracks in this album from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Starting with Mythanien, which is in the beginning there was light, a little orb of light, so tiny that it could not have been seen with the naked eye had it not been for the pure white radiant light of life, twitching, wriggling, whirling, and rushing. It fell into the darkness of Mythanien without a sound of silence, without a breath of wind. Cool. Let's go from the top. Just a little bit of background there for each of the tracks. Is one for each of the 13. Well, it's really pretty how the piano keys cascade down. Is that like the light coming down from the sky? Is that it? I mean, it's very pretty sounding. The piano playing is very articulate. Nice to have that dynamic range, things coming down here. Major twist there. I assume this is potentially going to be a piano instrumental, but we're going to find out, obviously. Riffing over an established motif. Bit of modulation. And then bring it back up. It's triumphant and yeah. Playful little almost grace notes, legato passages there. Great. No, that was well played. The piano playing is clearly articulate. We have an understanding of how to string different sections together with different note choices. That makes sense. I think there was enough variety in there to justify the 3-minute 20 playtime. We didn't really need to play more than we did. We didn't overplay, and we left a little bit of range in the dynamics of it to make it more interesting by virtue of it not being the same perceived loudness the entire time. We had scale there. And it makes you wonder what we'll got next. We got Taama, track number 2. The river was not only the epitome of lively lightness, it was the source of all hope in the beginning of history. Okay, track number 2, Taama. A little bit more calm than the previous one. Pleasant. Again, I've mentioned this before with Fred Vanterra's work, because I reviewed it in the past. I believe that we could do well with video game music, doing soundtracks for that kind of thing. Nice to have alternate lead voicings on the right hand. They're very slightly to harmonize with what's going on the right with the broken chords. Does sound like the continued flowing of a river. Sticking within the traditional sort of key scales, key sigs and scale shapes, as opposed to the previous track Mythanien, where we had some chromatics that were more palatable and easy to listen to, though Mythanien was still pleasant to listen to, don't get me wrong, just from a purely ethereal perspective. The feel of it, quote unquote. Again, nice use of the bell curve, quietening down at the end. Nice. Really subtle finish. Sometimes people will have a big chord at the end just to kind of slam it out and have that big finish. But I think we're trying to illustrate to the listener that the song or the tale is not finished yet, which makes sense because we've still got 11 tracks to go. The guy just plays piano well. I mean, I teach piano to students, and there is a clear understanding of not only how to play the keys and chords in a way that is enjoyable to listen to and how to sort of bring things together, but it's also the personality that's imbued within it through the use of the triad choices you have, the way that you actually press the keys, the intensity, the rhythmic phrasing of them. It's great. It's really well done. We've got Amry, track number 3, the sweet scents, the odors that sprinkled the summer meadows led to Amry, but like a rose has thorns, the city also had its dark side. Thanks to Fred for translating these, by the way. I appreciate that. I wouldn't potentially be able to read the German otherwise, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Amry, number 3. I have already reviewed this, by the way, if I have not mentioned that before. So I'm aware that Fred can play. Refining, firming up that motif. Establishing lead voices. A little bit of adjustment there with the cascading melodies here, almost a piano solo. I suppose this is that minor, that dark side that we were discussing earlier in the little intro section. Those flat second intervals are awkward. A little bit jarring. I mean, pedal noting the triads is nice. Going between the octaves is great. It's interesting that we had two faces to this song almost, you know. The first part, which was very nice and warm sounding with those full major octave shares, and then now finishing on that minor triad with the trepidation of the octaves is a bit of a twist. And that low note kind of illustrates a sense of, oh, has something bad happened? Are things not what they seem? Are things not ideal? And it's interesting that we decided to do it like that. I don't have a lot more to say on this track than as opposed to the previous review that I did. I think that, again, it's an example of Fred's fantastic piano playing, and ultimately it illustrates an A and B side within the same piece, which makes good use of the 4 minutes. I don't really think we needed to change anything with this. It's a purely creative spectacle, a fantasy world that he's created here, and I appreciate the fact that we're getting the opportunity to listen to it because it's well done. Firnya. The cold crept into the lore of the world, and compassion grew cold in the last defenses of civilization. Only the gateway to Firnya stood between life and the consuming cold of the eternal ice. So as I understand it, 2000 is the year that it was written. So these tracks span over, obviously from 2000 through to 2015 at the end. And I think that's good that we included all those tracks we wrote there. It shows our development as a musician. And it'll be interesting to see how we mature over time, especially as most of these have been written. Well, Taama was written in 2009, but still. We got Firnya anyways, track number 4. Are we using like an electronic keyboard? We might not be. I wouldn't mind either way. It's just the attack of the notes may indicate that. Unless it's a very bright piano. It's great to move to that mid-higher range here with the strings floating and dancing over top, or rather the notes, the keys, dancing over top. Nice to have them integrating in an interesting manner over a 16th note groove. It's very delicate and almost fragile. Oh, interesting. We didn't resolve to the root node. Boom, 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 boom. It's fine. I don't necessarily mind that. It leads a sense of lack of knowing what's going to happen next, as if life is unpredictable and we shouldn't take it for granted. Interesting track. It's short form. I like it. I like it when they're short form because they're like popcorn, you know. It's easy to eat them and kind of absorb them, you know. The favorite part for me was when we went into that higher range there. I like it when musicians deliberately focus on a mood that can relate around that right hand, you know? It's great to have that sense of things floating in the air, you know, like those high notes on the right hand. It was charming and it illustrates that there is still beauty even in the tension there with that gate between the two sides of the opposing forces. We got Kuha Baza. The world behind was deprived of all colors, but from the blinding snow peeped out isolated pitch-black branches of those trees which carried the secret of life. Ah, interesting. It's an interesting world that we're creating for sure. See how there's an opposing bass line and the high notes? Tempo increasing. Great resonance in that low range. Contrasts. Work in those low to high ranges that contrast really well. It's interesting to me because I'm assuming this had that image in mind, right? The story, the perspective when we were coming up with these parts. I like counterpoint. How the different hands dance between one another on that part. As if the trees are trying to navigate and wiggle their way out of the ether for a new chance at life. Great. Well done. I think I had enough of that theme within the first 2 minutes to not necessarily need the other two. When there's a lack of significant difference and change within the way a song is performed, you get used to that very quickly. And I suppose at this point in the album, I'm already used to the way the piano sounds. I'm aware of how well, Fred can play. So it's like, what else is there that is going to surprise us at this point? And if that sounds like I'm being a bit harsh, it's not that I find it uninteresting. It's more like what the danger of having a solo instrumental is that you have to find new ways to spice things up on that one instrument in order to retain your listener. And if they're anyone other than someone who is profusely enamored with the instrument and wants to only hear the keys, you have to be pulling some really interesting, unique stuff with each track. I'm not sure if I particularly felt anything like I did with the rest, but again, that just could be because I've already heard the other tracks and I'm sensing a consistency here. I'm wondering if this would be a point where you would want to have other instruments come in, as if to say, hey, I know you're used to the piano, but we could also have like strings here or something. But I also know that's cliched. And, Fred is within their right to be able to just have an instrumental without the need for that. I don't know. It's interesting though. I mean, we've got Nemul next, written in 2009. When the door to the crotch kalosh opened, sweet mead, sour meat, and old sweat pricked the nose. Okay. See, this is a bit more sassy with the groove there, the swing triplets. It's fun. Sorry to interrupt. Is the panning of this where the piano is mostly to the left side, if it's the bass clef, and then obviously to the right is the other side of the keyboard? It's just I'm noticing obviously that because the hand is around that mid to right part, and the left is more obviously on the left side of the keyboard, there is a discrepancy and unevenness within the stereo field. There's a resonance of the reverb tails on the sides. It actually ironically probably makes it more interesting because maybe it's a usual thing. That glissando is pretty tight though. I kinda need this after Kuha Baza. It's nice to go up to that seventh. Okay, I mean, the glissandos were a little bit sharp for me, like EQ-wise, but aside from that, I think that was a little bit more exciting and energetic, and it made me a little bit more interested in the album again. Not that I particularly lost interest in it entirely, but it's more after Kuha Baza and the consistency there with a lot of the ideas that are throughout the previous tracks. It's more like I needed something like this with a little bit sort of more pep in it to be like, oh, okay, new vibe. Can I keep it going? Because when you're writing music and you're wanting to release it, with wanting to release it being the key thing here, if you're just writing music for yourself, that's dope. Do whatever you want. But if you wanted to release it, and show it to people. The thing that will really sort of screw your chances is if you don't have enough diversity within a track and if you just rest on your laurels here. I'm glad that at this halfway point we had a bit of more of a sassy thing. It kind of does remind me of being inside a bar and having someone playing the keys, and like you can imagine people around you and just people dancing and grooving along. That's cool. This song worked for me, and I think the short form factor was great as well because you got that concept within those 2 minutes and then you just left to sit on it. It's great. We've got the B-side here, Maryat, 2010. Maryat was more than just a home and a city where everyone is welcome, everyone finds their homeland. That's kind of beautiful. This does sound very warm and inviting with those major tonalities. Really pretty reverb ambience to it. I like the fact we had some interesting parallels there, like that parallel minor note we just had, or that flat, whatever it was meant to be. It's usually major. There isn't any quantizing here, you know, the guy can just play. Okay, so as a vibe, as an idea, a concept, it works. It does sound like you are in your hometown and people around you are conversing and hugging each other and very warm and familial with one another. Major tonalities within the chord progressions and the constant movement between really gentle bass lines is charming, and I think that the tone of the keys enhanced that because of how cheery it was. It wasn't the same as Nemul, where it was more kind of like spicy with the string rhythms. This was more of a kind of warm blanket and a cup of hot cocoa. So it's well done. Well done. And again, nice and short, so easy to sort of digest. We got track number 8, Enjar. Wispy trees led into the depths of the forest, in the midst of which was not merely wisdom. Enjar was the origin of all things and the fountain of life which erupted and released its energy as if electrified. So that's cool. Track number 8. Let's go. Let's do it. A little bit more regal this time. Not itching to go to a particular direction emotionally. Smart. It's nice to have things go down a little bit. Usually in the middle of a track, things go up, you know? I suppose that's the freedom you have when things are through composed. You can do whatever you want. Nice use of trills there, by the way. We've had these 16th note grooves before, these rhythmic instantiations, as a development thing. They work as developments, you know. Oh, we resolved that one, went up to the top of the scale. That's cool. It was nice to go down right to the low depths of the left side of the keys. I know for you that's the right, this is the left, but for me this is the left. just in case we needed to clarify which way the left and right was. But Enjar did kind of sound like it was describing a tree, a mystical tree. It was very regal and almost affluent, mystical. There was a sense of grace to it. It does sound very distinct to a lot of the previous tracks we've had, such as Kuha Baza and Nemul and Maryat. I think that's really positive because you need these tracks to sound distinct. And I think part of what I was having the issue with, or rather, yeah, well, I mean, Kuha Baza was the thing I had the issue with, where it sounded a little bit too samey to previous tracks. So these last two, I think, tonally have been a little bit more varied. And people are going to probably disagree with me on that. And that's fine. You're welcome to disagree with it. I wouldn't be saying it if I, thought it was going to start an argument unless that was the way I legitimately processed it. This is part of why, again, you've got to be careful with instrumentals, is that if you have too few instruments, it can sound samey by virtue of having limitations on what you can accomplish without combining different ingredients together. But to be fair to Fred, he is a great pianist, so there is enough diversity within this to keep me entertained for the most part. I've enjoyed the previous few tracks, and Enjar is no exception. I think the theme worked, and I'm starting to see more patterns here, and I'm happy with them. We've got track 9 here, Casoley. Castelle was a place of true purity whose cliffs were always illuminated by a never-setting western sun. Let's continue. Track number 9. Elegant with triplets. Or is it 3/4 or like 6/4, 6/8? I think it might be 6/8. 1 and 2 and 3 and... I don't know if that's in sync. Hopefully it's not too far off. Unexpected progression here. It's very peaceful. It almost makes me want to take a nap. That's because it's relaxing, by the way, not because I think it's boring. Wonder how long it took Fred to write each track. Did they notate it? I mean, because if we started in the early 2000s, we didn't have the audio technology we have now. It wouldn't have been as easy to have been using MIDI equipment to tab stuff out. I'm not going to pretend we were in the Stone Ages back then, especially as I was alive back then, but very different to how people write music now, you know? Very friendly sounding track. No, charming. Really pretty. I think that was very satisfying with the conclusion there, primarily because what we had going on was more of the playing the piano, more carefully considered transfers between various sections. We didn't just sit on one motif here, which I think would have been less than ideal considering the length of the track. We had a few different concepts there, similar to what we had with tracks like Amry, where we kind of had an A and B side, but we had more of a harmonic consistency here. We stuck to relatively friendly sounding major triads, and we avoided any harsh notes, which I know we're capable of putting in here from previous tracks. And it was more of a way of relaxing rather than being viscerally excited by a track, and I think that Castelle was very pleasant to listen to. Got Tahara, track number 10 from the Birds. Point of view, the river looked like the lifeline of a dragon's head resting in the evening sun, caressed to sleep by the gentle beat of the waves. I wonder how we're going to finish this. Is that a chromatic? Oh. Are we playing with the listener's emotions? Because if so, I'm not mad about that. Great major lift. Ooh, that tension. That tonal tension is something. Oof. Those quick flutters down and up are intriguing. Is that like the waves going up and down? Or the bird's wings? Very solemn though. There's a sadness around the waves. Oh, Ukraine uses staccato there. Pregnant pauses. I enjoyed when there were the staccatos. I almost feel like we haven't had enough use of space within this album. I like when there's moments where you're uncertain of what's going to happen next. When there's a change to the flow, the continuity of the instruments and their sounds within a composition. It makes it less predictable. And even if we had slight fluctuations and variations with the actual speed of the rhythm we're playing, a more fluid tempo, even if we had variety with the harmonies and melodies here and we're using some notes that were potentially unconventional to the keys we instantiated at the beginning, it's just little things like bum, bum. They just make it a little bit more exciting because it's like, oh, what's this? Track 10, you know? I like that. I think that it's good to use the most of ornamentation when you can. Decorate your music in a way that's meaningful and people will stick around for more. Though I will say that I did like Tahara as a song. I thought that was well done. Then we got Stalaga. Every breath of wind in the depths of the world seemed like a breath of the mountain, which flowed evenly through the branching passages of the caves. Track number 11. Let's go. Instantly in that higher range. It's interesting they've gone straight down to that mid-range. Great power in those accents there. It's great to have those chord harmonies on the right. I've arranged those intervals. Kind of wild to have the left hand over that far. I think both are in the treble, aren't they? They do sound like stars. Great. I enjoyed that. I thought that was well played. Fred Vanterra has continuously explored the keys within this album, not just creating a world for us all to kind of get lost in and, hopefully appreciate depending on what you're into, but also it's a reasonably creative way of showing his ability and proficiency as a pianist. And it's evident here that we know what we're doing. It's pleasurable to listen to, for sure. And I think there's really little that we needed to adjust with this one. It wasn't necessarily the most jaw-dropping, inspiring song I've heard in my life, but I can appreciate the skill required to be able to play music like this. I could appreciate the compositional development we had throughout. We added extra notes on the same instantiated themes that we put in previously, just to kind of continue to build it up before that finish there. I liked the changes in perceived loudness. And Crystarcis, according to legend, it is only the breath of the gods that is able to cleanse the world of all evil. High up on the crystal ridge they rest in the eternal ice to be awakened one day. Crystarcis. Lots of interesting words. There we go. Couldn't get it to work for a moment. We like our wholesome progressions. Very few extensions. Dancing between the triads and their octaves. Modulation. Great contrast between the complexity of the two hands. The spice, though. The zazz, though. This is fun. This has caught my attention. Oh. Damn, the tenor, he's so good. Yeah, that was great. I loved the energy in that last section. It was very invigorating. I was honestly starting to kind of zone out a little bit at that midpoint there, simply because it was very similar to what we had previously. And then suddenly kicks it up. And it's like, whoa, wait, what's happening here? What is this? Why has this suddenly gotten so much bigger and more? It's like we basically sped up what we had previously, made it like times 2 tempo, That was fun. That isn't something we've had in the album before. That was a good idea. It takes the listener by surprise, encourages them to hear more, to see where the craziness will go next. I assume that's things coming out of the ice, is that it? The drama before the storm? I haven't really got a lot else to say about it, to be honest. It was really impressive, really. Those those little legato flutters there were just fantastic. Fantastic. And then finally, we have Castelle, 2015. A dance without joy, a celebration without cheerfulness, but the music would not fade away even at the end of all things. Let's do it. The final track off of the album. So this is the music. Oh. Growth. Right. Ah, here we go. Bum, 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 bum. That's charming. That waltz. Again, fantastic dynamic range. Switching it up with the key sig as well. Is that a modulation there? I think it would be. Ooh, that's very fancy, isn't it? It pulsates. The growth of the music from nothing again. Great. Interesting finish. And that's his most recent one, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 13. I think that there is clearly maybe a little bit more sort of proficiency just due to experience over the last 14 years. Or like from the previous track he made, the earliest track he made in 2000, if I'm not mistaken. But I think there's still an understanding of keeping a sense of tonal consistency to it. these stories that he wrote, these songs that he made. It's great. It's great stuff. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album by Fred Vanterra, titled Mythanien. What do I think this album is about? Well, I think this album is about stories that Fred Vanterra has written, and the music is there to represent it. And I believe that it's cool that we were able to do it. We had the inspiration, the creativity to be able to strive towards these ideas and put them onto a solo instrument and keep it captivating for 40 minutes, with some exceptions which I spoke about. It's not that I am disinterested in what we were performing today, because I was interested. The vast majority of it was, it was really special, because we had someone who could not only play, but also voice things in a very articulate way emotionally. They could project the feel, quote unquote, that they wanted to provide to the listener, the audience there, in a way that was meaningful. And they never slept on an opportunity to give the listener more of what they could do without ever overplaying. It never seemed like an ego project. It was more about communicating like a fantasy world to a listener and getting them to get invested in it. I think that a lot of people who, especially those who appreciate piano, will listen to this and go, yeah, I can vibe with that. I'm not totally sold on like having the concept of like having notes for a track. I get it. I get that you need to have the description there so that people can understand it. I'm not totally sold on that. I personally feel that music should describe what it's about to you, whether that is through either having vocals or you have Foley. You have sounds that aren't necessarily the instrument that allow the listener to kind of understand what you're talking about. Like for the one where we were you could smell the meat, etc. I think you could, Nemul, if I'm not mistaken, you could have had like people at a bar or something like that drinking and talking, like maybe some Foley from that to kind of illustrate that. It's not that I don't appreciate being given liner notes and helped out to find out what a track is about, but I personally prefer when I can figure it out without needing those. I shouldn't need to go to a secondary source of information to understand the primary. It should be there within it. And you're free to disagree with me on that. It's just that I can't guarantee when people listen to the albums like this that they will know to instantly find those hidden meanings, if that makes sense. That they will know to find the notes on it. Because as per Spotify, you can see here, it's just that. It's just the album. So we have a situation here where even if there is a really wonderfully written world that is devised and transcribed by Fred Vanterra, there is a chance that a lot of people won't get to fully appreciate it unless they find that extra information. And I'm glad that I did have that extra information, because I thought the music was great. On the topic of the actual songs themselves, due to a lack of vocals, I think that the piano, being the solo instrument, was played wonderfully. We had a firm grasp of the bass hand and the voice hand, and we would basically roll with the bass notes, some chords occasionally, some broken chord parts. We fluctuated between simple lead melodies to little flurries and extra little bits of kind of sassery with quicker notes and legato passages there. We had moments of unison between the two. Sometimes the hand would go counter to each other and come together, and they kind of like birds kind of going in and out. And I think that there's a lot to like there. There's a lot of range to the piano playing. There were lots of different styles there. So there was some sort of swing articulations there. There was waltz. There was classical. There was almost cinematic fantasy going on. Almost balladesque stuff without the development of the inclusion of the actual additional instruments there. There were A and B sides to tracks. The songs themselves were varied in the way that they were performed there. We had understanding of how to incorporate majors, minors, and sus triads within there with interesting interval and octave placements there. And not only could we play professionally, it was also the fact that we knew to not only stick with those notes that would make sense and are neutral and pretty well easy to deal with, but we also had some chromatics like flat seconds, some parallel majors or minors. We had modulations of ideas between shapes, such as in Castelle. I think ultimately the dynamic range was the other star of the show. Things weren't the same loudness the whole time. We had lots of range between the quiet and loud notes, and we never really strayed too far from that. We were in a position where we could really appreciate having that life to it, that vibrancy, that almost it sounded like a live performance, and I adore that. It makes me sad when things are overproduced or encumbered by a lack of restraint in regards to compression, post-production stuff, or simply an insecurity about how to voice stuff through the instrument itself. But when we're able to allow ourselves to really play and feel what we're doing, it comes through authentically and makes it a more engaging experience. I think that regardless of whether we're doing 2-minute tracks or 4-minute tracks, we managed to successfully get what we wanted in regards to the composition. We voiced ourselves well, and the tracks for the most part sounded very, very close to what we were trying to describe there. Aside from like the extra little hints I would potentially appreciate for instrumentals in future, it's also just really, we just had the studio recording, mixing and mastering where it was the piano. The piano was nicely filled and EQ'd, wide in the stereo field, with the left side, far left being the far left of the stereo field, and the high treble being the right side. And the hands explored that, and we could kind of tell where he was on the instrument by virtue of where the notes were coming from in the headphones. And I thought it's cool, it makes sense. And because of that, the music surrounded you. It didn't just stay in one place. He was playing in all sorts of positions on the keyboard throughout the 8 octaves, and I think that was smart. And he made the most of them. There was dynamic range. There wasn't really any leveling to do because there weren't other instruments. And it was nice and loud without pumping. I mean, ultimately, and of course there were nice reverb tails on it. It was an airy, wonderful ambience to it with warmth as well, though. It wasn't cold. There was warmth to the tone of the instrument there, which I really appreciate. And effectively, this is my review of Fred Vanterra's album Mythanien, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show him some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.